Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal and first of our syndicated stations on 93 WIBC out of Indianapolis. And if you hear that scribbling noise right now, that's the journalists from the Indianapolis Star scribbling furiously because of our next guest. That would be the one, the only Attorney General of the state of Indiana, Todd Rokita. Good to have you on amidst all of the grumpiness the last time you hopped by.
Tony, great to be with you. You did misspeak, though, I will say. You called it the Indianapolis Star. It's really the Indianapolis Star newsletter.
Oh, yeah, the newsletter, the blog at this point, the foodie page on Facebook. Poor people.
No, they're great if they just wouldn't get so much wrong.
Well, let's give them something to be wrong about, all right? Let's dig in. So the last time we chatted, we spoke about that parental portal that you had set up so that parents could help kind of keep an eye on some of the things that were going on in Indiana public schools. How has that been going since? Because they called you the devil, and I guess that was quite the promotion.
Yeah, well, we're in the summer months now, so there's a little bit of a doldrum on the website, but it is going. We continue to get new submissions. We continue to remember, Tony. The whole point of this was transparency.
Absolutely.
Right. When we started fighting against CRT, and when I say we, it was not just me and the Attorney General's office. It wasn't just other attorneys general, but there was a movement of parents since COVID that came and said, you know what, we're in charge of our parents' education. That's how
racial discrimination. Not a fan.
Yeah, and that's how it should be, and our kids shouldn't be taught to hate each other.
Absolutely.
Right. That's the first tool of the left. So once we started calling all that out, these school administrators, and you know who I'm talking about, the type at least,
right,
and these teachers said, oh, that stuff doesn't happen here. Well, I immediately got 30 or so submissions from parents showing me how it wasn't happening.
Right? Now, wait a minute. I was told reliably that it wasn't. I was actually told to tell parents and teachers that it wasn't happening, even though it was very clearly and specifically. And the other thing that I'm told is that, at least in the other big area, the Democrats, not just in Indiana but abroad, but of course in Indiana, are pushing very heavily for is the issue of abortion. They're saying that there are no late-term abortions. This is all like 3 hours after conception, and it's just a blob of tissues. And they think this is the next great crusade of our time. I'm not seeing it. I mean,
in Indiana, we have something called Hoosier common sense, and their arguments are so weak and so thinly veiled, it defies common sense. And so, all we have to do is just be genuine and honest with Hoosiers, the American people, and I think the rest will take care of itself.
So if the rest is going to take care of itself, that means that as a culture, as a society, then we need to consider the needs of individuals specifically, and not create these large, sweeping, motivational pushes towards public policy in the form of government subsidies and handouts. And at least in Indiana, we're still seeing increasing amounts of money diverted into the education system, not to pay for teacher salaries, not to pay for school supplies, but to pay for this ever-burgeoning class of pseudo-administrators, like I myself once was, that sit there and take a big salary and do nothing for the schools themselves. Right. Do we have any plan, at least as far as Indiana Hoosiers here in the Republican Party, to maybe come up with some kind of a solution for this in the future?
Yeah, well, I think the first, and I'm speaking as a leader in Indiana, leader of the party. It's not part of my official role.
Right. Yeah.
But they could argue that lesson plans wasn't part of my official role either. But I saw no one else doing it, no one else calling this stuff out. So we did the portal, we did the Parents' Bill of Rights. So I'll answer the question in that kind of vein. And the fact of the matter is, you can't just, this whole idea that we can solve a problem by throwing money at it has to go away. So that's the first realization. Oh, I'm going to put
Has
more
it worked yet, though?
No,
I mean, I'm still looking for a single situation in which there's some kind of an organization, agency, they're on fire, they're doing terribly, and we throw money on the bonfire, and then they're shocked when the money catches on fire.
Yeah. The CARES Act was just the latest chapter in that. So it's an admission and a realization that you had to look at these problems a lot more granularly, in a lot more complicated fashion, and it takes some serious policy work, and we got to get to it. And the first thing is not to do everything for the minority. What do I mean by minority? I mean just a small group of people, whoever they are. We seem to engineer our public policy around tens of people.
The eggshell skull case, right? Because one person has a soft skull, we need to legislate everyone wear a helmet. Excellent. Yeah, that's what you mean by that. And you said granularly, and it reminded me of how, again, media at home and perhaps abroad have gone after you so consistently over the last couple of years of your term of office, it seems like the entire media establishment in the state of Indiana is hell-bent on getting you barred from office. What do you think's got them so under their skin? Are you really just the evil monopoly man with devil horns?
Well, I don't know. It's part of the Trump derangement syndrome, I would say. I mean, I'm not trying to equally compare myself to President Trump, but it's the same kind of thing, right? He's endorsed me. I've endorsed him. We have the same kinds of policies.
Allies in the same cause and movement.
Yes, and we both have populist streaks, and they can't stand it. Because they've never seen, really, in Indiana, a Republican fight back, I think, like I have. I mean, I just throw it right back in their face. I do things that they say are outside the lane of Attorney General. And I say, you know what? So what? As long as it's not duplicative. We are statewide office holders, and we have children to save. We have children to protect. That's our most precious gift and asset. And I'm not wasting my time. This is my second time back in politics. Right? I was in the private sector before this. And I'm not wasting, Tony, a second of my time not trying to, with all my power, all my intellect, all my strength, to save this country, including the state of Indiana.
So if we're going to save the state of Indiana, again, on with Indiana's own Attorney General Todd Rokita, if we're going to save the state of Indiana, it means actually dealing with a lot of the problems that Hoosiers repeatedly and consistently say they have. And these are property taxes. My property tax bill just continues to skyrocket.
Mine too.
And then also, in parallel to this, it feels like the gas tax also continues to climb for roads that aren't getting any better. And I'm not talking about like the interstates. That's not what I'm talking about. I know that's a local government issue with how the counties get all their roads up in place. How do we, as a Hoosier state, actually start, and I'm not talking to you in your capacity as an attorney general, I'm talking to you as a party leader with the Republican Party.
Yeah.
How do we start to move towards solving some of the issues that average Hoosiers, who you've worked for and fought for, how do we actually start giving something for them instead of the same? I mean, good God, I had to hear Suzanne Crouch, axe the tax, and we'd ask her about property taxes, and she dodged the question.
It was
How do we actually start attacking the right stuff?
Well, we have to have honest conversations with our local officials. My belief, the reason that happened the way it did, why she and others focus on the income tax and not the property tax, is because the way Indiana funds its local government and schools is largely through property taxes. So.
Right.
Suzanne's base of support were a lot of these local officials, and I know a lot of them. And and having been in other offices before, they can get the pitchforks out and create a lot of ire, and they make a lot of good points. They're good people. But you have to have the sit down and say, we got to do this a different way, and and we have to balance this out differently. And we have to put better caps. What Mitch Daniels did 15 years ago was wonderful, but they've gotten a little dated, and people have found ways to go around those caps that we put in our Constitution. So it takes serious policymakers. I am willing to help lead that discussion.
So the last question that I really want to take you into here very quickly, do you believe that, first of all, I'm not going to ask you, I'm not going to waste your time asking if you think that Indiana needs a better primary turnout. It's clear that we do. The primary turnout in the last election was just abysmal for me. I did not like the slight, small, minuscule number of Hoosiers that turned out. How do we increase Hoosier participation in our local primary election? Because that's where things are won and lost. We as Hoosiers put so much stock into the general, and it's important, but man, I really want to see some more primary attention.
Tony, I'm a big fan of yours because you help shine light on the education issues and so many other issues. So I don't mean this as a quibble, but my question is actually larger than that. I think that primaries, frankly, are taxpayer-funded conventions, just like this, right? So it's really the taxpayers that are funding the selection of party candidates, of party nominees. So I say take as much as you can back to the convention at the state level. Let the parties tell the public, okay, here's who we picked, and then let the public judge in the general. So I don't
take that as a quibble. I just think that's a solution to a possible problem out there. I don't think that, I could throw a chair at you, or I could, chuck you out of here in any manner of ways, but, I don't know if that's really the best way to move.
Because really, the parties do a great job of picking the candidates that they want. Really going. I mean, I get examined a lot of detail about every move I made, everything I did in the convention process. I've been through 3 conventions, and those voters at the convention have really vetted it much more than a primary voter will. Not that that's a fault of a primary voter, but you're asking them to pick inside parties who the best candidate should be, and that's a full-time job of media personalities.
I think you're absolutely dead on there. Todd Rokita, Attorney General of Indiana, thank you very much for joining us and stopping by on this beautiful RNC Day.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it.
We'll be back in just a second. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC and the Daily Signal.